Right, it's just a little bit of a pellet tip because we're out today and it's February, but it's actually feeling a little bit springy. It's like it's livening up a little bit. So with that in mind, I'm definitely starting to think about my summer ahead. Yeah, last year for me, the biggest lesson I learned was presenting my bait in different ways when fishing for carp. I mean, all the big matches I fish these days, or the big finals that I try and get in, they're all at big, for match anglers, big carp dominated venues. Larford and Hayfield, you're fishing for proper fish, you're fishing for 5 to 10 pound carp on average. So the old ways of, or for my background, coming from an F1 style of fishing, they need to go out the window completely. We need to endorse a much more of a specimen angler approach, a carp angler approach. And so my first step for me was changing the way we present bait. I think the lazy old way that I used to have of fishing every single hard pellet I fished on a band, just simply through being lazy tying rigs, if I'm completely honest, I think it's wrong. Yeah, I think it presents your bait poorly on the bottom in a lot of situations when ledgering, whereas it could be done a lot better, or can be done a lot better with a few little edges I want to show you. So for me, that's been my biggest thing. Last year, that was my key thing that I learned, was to present my bait better. And what I want to go through is through a couple of little ways that by playing about with how my bait sits on my hair rig, and a few little things I do to it, for me it gives me the edges towards everyone else, and it does puts me slightly in that carp bracket, that specimen carp angler bracket. That they understand rigs so much better than those match anglers do, and I think it's something that we need to imply into our own fishing, just to make things better for the size of fish that we're targeting these days. So first thing I want to talk about is the way that my pellet sits on my band. So what I've actually done, a bit of a Blue Peter moment, is I've prepared the 3 different types of pellets, or the 3 pellets in different ways that I want to prepare them for how I want to put them on the hook. Because firstly, as I mentioned, the biggest problem I think that we had is putting everything on a band so your pellet actually sits in the wrong way when you're fishing on the bottom, when you're ledgering on the bottom with a straight lead. I think it's wrong to have your hook and then your pellet at horizontally sideways to it, so it's like a T-piece if you like. Your hook sat there and your pellet sat that way. Instead, I think it's much better to have an elongated pellet. So instead of having a band wrapped around the middle of the pellet, you have a line going right the way through it. You fish it on a traditional hair rig style of sort of things with a stop underneath it to keep it in place, because that way it keeps it in a much more straight line, and it's so much easier for a fish to take in, and it actually makes it easier for the hook to actually get into the fish as soon as it does try and spit it out, or when it moves off and hooks itself against your lead. So that's my first pellet that I've done for today, is that I've drilled some pellets right the way through the middle of the pellet, and that allows me to put them on a nice big long hair rig, and they sit nicely on my hook. My hook sits there and my pellet sits long ways on my hair rig, which gives me such a nice form of presentation. That's my biggest edge, if you like, in just taking a bit more time to drill my pellets and make sure they're nicely sat on that hair rig. So secondly, I've also drilled some pellets the opposite way. So slightly contradicting what I've said with the band that you don't want them sideways, but I wouldn't use these pellets on their own, the ones that have been drilled through the side of the pellet. Therefore, at any time, I want to use a double pellet. So I can match those holes up, put a hair rig right the way through them, the same hair rig that I can use on an elongated pellet, and that gives me the option of using a double pellet on the same hair, which makes my hair lovely and versatile, meaning I can mess them up with my baits, whether I need a standout bait or whether I need a blend-in bait to what I'm feeding, and I can make whichever one is best on the day. I can play about and use either just by having a nice little drill and doing a few in both different ways, so I can mess about on the day, see what's best. Right, so we're me ledgering pretty much covered. So my third option in presenting a bait, that'll be for whenever I'm waggler fishing. And for that, I don't honestly bother with the messing about with drill pellets and having to use a needle to put my pellets on. I just find it too slow. With a method that I need to be really, really quick at, when I'm casting a lot, replacing my bait a lot when it takes on water, I still find that when fishing a waggler with hard pellets, the traditional banding, just a straightforward band on a hair, that's always the best for me. What I do, however, it's like a little sneaky tip that it's been around forever. It's something I've seen a lot of people do, just to give me confidence, if anything, that my bait's always going to stay on, is by making sure that any pellets that I put on when I'm fishing a waggler, I make sure I groove everything. Yeah, really, really dead simple little tip. Just by having half a junior hacksaw blade, I'll leave that in my box, and I can put a groove in one side of the pellets, flip it over, give it another groove in the other side, and what that'll give me is a nice little couple of slots that my band, as soon as I put it on, it'll ping into those slots, and it just keeps your pellets on. So when you're really trying to whack that pellet off multiple times, when you're casting every 30 seconds possibly in the summer months. You need a pellet that's just going to stay on a little bit better, and something that's as tiny as that, it can just help you be a bit more efficient, so you're not putting a new pellet on every flipping time you reel it in. So they're my 2 little tips pretty much for presenting me bait in better ways. So lastly, one little edge that I've been pretty much obsessed with since playing about with carp stuff last summer, is keeping my pellets in additives and oils. Yeah, for me, oil's still pretty much the one. So it's just starting to get a little bit warmer now, so I've disregarded all oils all winter. They're not quite right, but now that the water's getting warmer, so it's actually around 6-7 degrees now, so it's starting to get better. I'm up for oils on all of my bait. I find that an oil makes my pellet work so much better in both. It keeps it harder on the bottom for longer, because it almost makes it a little bit waterproof. But the attraction properties as well are massive with oils. Fish love eating oils when they start hunting for bait. So I can have my little tub, and in there, if I can get the lid off, I've got all sorts of different pellets in there. They're all the same pellets, they're all just 8mm pellets, but I've got them prepared in all different ways. I've got them both drilled both ways, and I've got some grooved ones. And it just makes it really easy for me to put a more attractive pellet than what I'm feeding on my hook every time, and hopefully stack the odds in my favour of getting a bite every time I chuck that pellet into the lake.